Should your pastor speak up about politics? And the answer is absolutely. For 2 decades, pastors of various denominations preached about the values of freedom and Christianity before the first shots were fired at Lexington and Concord, which started the American Revolution. It is even said that a pastor was one of those in the militia fighting against British aggression. The account is told of a pastor by the name of John Muhlenberg, while in his black clerical robe said this: "There's a time for war and a time of peace. There's a time for all things, a time to preach and a time to pray. But there's also a time to fight, and that time has come." And he removed his black clerical robe, and underneath was a colonial uniform. And to the sound of military drums outside the church, he stepped out and he signed up members of his church to go and fight for George Washington and the American Revolution. Pastors got such a reputation for speaking into politics, as well as at times fighting for the American Revolution, that they were nicknamed by British soldiers the Black Robe Regiment. Now, am I advocating for pastors to take up arms and violently rebel against the government? Absolutely not. I think Romans 13 makes it sort of clear how a pastor is supposed to respond. I know some would disagree with me. But the fact is, pastors and politics is as American as the military and the flag. Now, somewhere along the line, this radically changed and pastors limited what they spoke. And some of it might have to do with a tax code change that happened in 1954, where Senator Lyndon B. Johnson backed a change in the U.S. tax code that blocked some tax-exempt organizations, including churches, from supporting or opposing political candidates. They had to take a passive approach. They couldn't name names, or they could theoretically risk the IRS from coming and taking away their tax-exempt status. Well, over time, pastors have retreated from the political sphere of influence, and as a result, our politics have become a separate issue from our religious views. If a pastor wades into the conversation, he risks alienating himself from many in his church, or he might, fear the risk of losing his tax-exempt status. Now, I hear many Christians complain about the moral bankruptcy of America and how it's gone downhill. Yet if a pastor ever speaks into the political sphere, the rage that is built up in individuals when a congregant's sacred cow, the rage that comes up is unmatched. Now, I want us to think about this, okay? Your pastor is probably one of the most well-read people in your congregation. It is his job to keep up with the cultural changes and the challenges that face his people. He must be aware of the current and changing political climate, the laws that are impacting, his people. He's always looking at the news and watching and trying to be informed and seeing how these issues impact his church. He has most likely tried sharing the gospel with a variety of people that have a wide range and diverse set of views. And so he is very skilled in understanding what is going on around you. Why wouldn't we listen to his take on politics? You trust him to preach the Bible, God's living and breathing word to you, and apply it to your life. You trust him in family counseling situations. You trust him and his advice on how he helps you raise your kids and take care of them. You trust him at hospitals when you're in your hospital gowns about to have surgery. You call him when there's family emergencies. He's there when your family's in the hospital or someone has died. He's there always. But don't let him talk about your politics. There seems to be a huge disconnect there. So, now have I stepped on a few of your toes? Probably. But here's what I want us to take away from this. And the first reason is this. I would really like to encourage you to encourage your pastor to elaborate and discuss current political situations. Listen and ask questions. Don't fight him. Listen to how he shapes his arguments and see his approach. You might not agree with everything he says, but you will learn something. You will see how his biblical theology shapes his current reality. The second one is understand that half the church shouldn't agree with you politically. I have heard sound and logical reasons for why Christians vote Democrat. I have heard sound, logical reasons why Christians vote Republican. I have heard sound and logical reasons why Christians won't vote. I have heard sound and logical reasons why a Christian decides to vote for a third party. See, in the political spectrum, if you connect it with, you have the Republicans here and the Democrats here, we all sort of fit in this spectrum. Now, I know if you add in libertarians and other ones, you start creating, huge complication in where people fit, politically. But we all fit within this spectrum. And so there's always the extreme sides, where there's 10% right here and there's like 10% right there, and they fit. And then the rest of us usually follow in the middle here. Well, this percent here thinks that the 90% is always against them and they will always be fighting over something. And the 10% here will be here and they will always think that everyone who doesn't agree with them is somehow their enemy. And so you have these two extremes here, and then you have the rest of it here. And what I'm saying is everybody in your church, most likely people in your church, will fit in this 80%. And we all have to create a safe place for people to be able to talk through our political decisions and work through. People aren't going to agree with you on every single issue. I've heard it told to me, and it was in surprise, that a Baptist church could have Democrats into it. It shouldn't be that way. Our churches have people across the political spectrum, and that includes in your church as well. Don't be the extreme on the extreme sides where you treat the other 90% as the enemy. And number 3, I would like to encourage you to embrace your calling as an ambassador of Christ, not as an American citizen. And this last point we'll dive into in our next video. See you then.